Hello, everyone, and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am your host, Jeane Slone, the author of 3 historical fictions, She Flew Bombers, She Built Ships During World War II, and the newly published She Was an American Spy During World War II. Today, in our studio, I am very happy to introduce Bruce Allen. Welcome to WriterSpeak, Bruce.
Thank you so much. Good to be here, Jeannie. Good to be
And
here.
we are going to be talking about audiobooks. This is the first time we've had an interview about audiobooks on our program.
Oh, I'm honored. I'm absolutely honored.
So I was pretty excited about that because I'm a big fan of audiobooks.
That makes 2 of us.
I think audiobooks are wonderful if you're traveling, especially down I-5 to LA, where it's so boring. And audiobooks are really handy if you're just cleaning around your house or paying bills. It just fills your mind and puts you somewhere else.
I was told once that some of the vast amount of audiobooks are sold to cross-country truck drivers.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a big field there. And they radio each other. You ought to listen to this story. You ought to listen to that story.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's room for the audiobook for all of us.
Yeah, that's really
And
nice
I
to
love
know.
doing them. I love doing the audiobook. Absolutely.
So tell me, how did you become such a wonderful storyteller?
Why, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm an Irish Scot immigrant.
So does that make you automatically a good storyteller?
I think you get it injected somewhere along the line when you're a kid. I had 3 older brothers, and we told stories every night. We slept in this one great big room, like a little dormitory, and we told each other stories. My oldest brother would start off and tell wonderful stories, and then it would be my next brother, and then down. And of course, by the time it got to me, I was the last. Little Bruce would be sound asleep. But we started out that way, telling stories to each other. And my mother was a great storyteller from Ireland, and my grandfather from Scotland, Dundee, Scotland, he had all sorts of stories. He couldn't read nor write, but he was a storyteller. And that's how we kind of got going. It really took off for me many years later when I became a hospice and home care volunteer. I was lucky I retired at 50. Pretty good. Doesn't happen to a lot of people.
Yeah, these days.
Yeah, and I wanted to be useful in my life. So I volunteered all over the place. And then I was in a coffee shop in San Francisco, and there was a woman, older lady, beautifully dressed, but definitely up there in age. She's looking around, and I thought she was looking for someone. Well, she wasn't. She was looking for someplace to sit down. There was a vacant seat in front of this little table in this coffee shop, and I said, hey, sit here. Well, she sat down, and we started to talk, and she had been a nurse in the London Blitz during the bombing, and how they saved the patients, moved the patients down to the basement of the hospital. I was fascinated by it all.
I would be
We
too.
went on, and her talking and talking. And at the end of the conversation, she said to me, I was telling her about I'm volunteering all over the place, I'm cooking for the Salvation Army, on the AIDS hotlines, all that stuff I was doing. So she said to me, she said, hospice and home care is the granddaddy of volunteering. Look into that. And I did. I went to the Pacific Medical Center and took all the training, and pretty soon I found myself telling stories to my patients.
Well, before you go on about that, about your storytelling, tell our audience what hospice is.
Hospice is nothing but real, honest-to-God caring, really. When you work in hospice, people don't understand, hospice goes way back. In my stories, I take hospice way back when I was a kid. There was hospice in England, but there wasn't hospice in this country. And it was the people caring for the neighbor. It was the woman doing this. As I tell a story about B, who came in and cleaned old Anna's house every week and cooked enough food and bathed her and everything else. They were just friends. But it was hospice. We call it hospice at home care. Now hospice is beautifully put together professionally. And it's wonderful. It's great training. You're just being there. You're a witness. You're there to help, not to interfere. One of the things that was told me right at the beginning, don't bring your agenda to the patient. First line of hospice, don't bring your agenda to the patient.
And I love that line, just being there.
Yes.
Not interfering.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I've had such wonderful, wonderful patients. I hate to use the word patients, so they were friends. My first hospice patient friend went for 4.5 years. You believe that? Hospice, home care, hospice, home care.
You never know, really.
Yeah,
you never know when you're going to go.
Right there, I started telling him stories, and especially with the amputations and stuff like that, these horror shows. And he started asking for the same story. And I would tell him, he says, no, Bruce, it went the other way. And you realize as a storyteller, you're forever changing the story.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so anyway, more or less at that point, I decided it was time to start writing down the stories, which I did. But I was hospice home care for 23 years. I loved it. Every bit of it. The most exciting, wonderful people. Learn a lot.
So tell me what it does for the patient, the storytelling.
What's happened with me in doing this is, one, the patient starts to either relate to your story and understand it, or starts to tell their story based on your story. Then, and I believe, then you've kind of won the game. I had a great Aunt Mary who did this. So I tell a story about going to the two-room Cedar Street school when I was a kid. Then they say, well, I had a grandmother who went to a two-room schoolhouse in Minnesota or something like that. So it starts a connection. And in that connection, you hope that they kind of get away from where they are in their life, just for moments. At
the present time.
Yeah.
Because their life at the present time is so probably difficult.
Difficult, or waiting and unanswered questions and all sorts of things that happen towards the end of life. I'm 77. I'm heading there myself. And I'm
not these days.
Well, that's true.
There's people who are 150.
The last patient that I had, her name was Emily, and she lived to be 102. And I would visit her in San Francisco, and she had a big apartment on top of this building and a big grand piano. Emily was a ballerina before there was a San Francisco Ballet. And on Sundays, I would go in and play the piano for Emily, bring her food and things like that. And there she'd be, as I said, she went out at 102, but at 90 years old and 100 years old, she had the high heels on, the rouge on, and she would stand by the piano and she'd be doing her little kicks. And I'd be playing Glowworm for her. She loved Glowworm. Wonderful lady. She took no medication, baby aspirin, but she's a good Italian lady and said, 2 good glasses of wine, not cheap wine, 2 good glasses of wine with dinner is the best way to go. So you meet wonderful, wonderful people in hospice or home care, no matter what it is.
Well, what I enjoyed the most was, one of the things I enjoyed about your audio stories was the piano playing.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it brought back memories for me of my grandfather sitting on that antique wooden stool with the crystal balls.
Oh, the round one.
Yeah, the round
yes,
one.
Yeah.
He'd sit there and play piano. And every time I hear your piano playing, which is so lovely, it's interspersed throughout
Thank you.
all the stories.
Well, I
would always think about him.
I can thank my producer, John Renette, for that. He was wonderful. I did, of course, as you say, I play all the music in it.
Yeah.
But most of those theme songs I composed, too. Those were original. But I would like to speak to you very quickly about the piano player. Mm-hmm. There's a story in there called The Story of Miss Littlefield's Gift, who was my piano teacher. Yeah. And I wanted to be a little concert pianist and all the rest of it. And one time, I was waiting for my piano lesson in her big house, and it was Saturday afternoon, and the radio was on in the other room, and she was in having her lunch and being served, and I'm there with a little jacket and tie on waiting for my lesson. And I heard the radio, and finally she said, "Bruce, you can go in now, I'll be there." So I went in, I'm sitting at the big Steinway she had, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for Miss Littlefield. So I started to play the music that I heard, and she came in to me and she said, "Bruce, when did you learn Carmen?" And I said, "What's Carmen?" And she said, "The music you were just playing." And I said, "Oh, I just heard that on the radio." She said, "You heard that on the radio and you came in and played it?" I said, "Yes." She said, My. Would you play me something else?" Now, I was scared that I was doing things wrong. I was a little kid. So I started playing "Jesus Loves Me, This I Know," anything I heard. And then I think I played Paderewski's Minuet in G, my version of it. And at that point, my whole music life changed. She said to me, "You'll never be a concert pianist because you've got too many things you're interested in, Bruce." She said, "But you have something that I don't have, and I'm your teacher." And I said, "What's that, Miss Littlefield?" And she says, "You have the gift of hearing the music through your mind and playing it." She says, "That's the gift we're going to pay attention to." So she said, "From here on in, we'll do the Chopin and the rest of it." She said, "I want you to concentrate on learning that technique." And my friend, I've been playing the piano ever since I've been, 9, 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I'm 77 now. I play every day. And it's all through the mind. It's such a gift. And she said, "Give it away. Enjoy it, be selfish with it, but give it away." And I did. And here I am. The music is coming through the audiobooks. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
The turn of life is unbelievable.
And it's interesting because on audible.com it says they don't like music on the audiobooks.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I thought, well, they're way wrong with Bruce Allen.
Well, they must have liked mine because we signed a 7-year contract.
Yeah. I guess it
interesting,
doesn't always work out or something. But your piano playing is just at the perfect times and adds to it.
Thank you so
mood,
much.
the emotions.
Yeah. We tried to pick music that would fit the story without getting involved in the story, just way in the little background.
Yeah.
And again, thanks to my producer for that.
Yes. I think you had an excellent producer in that aspect.
He's turned out to be a good friend. Like I said, I was telling you earlier before we started talking, he said, "Everyone has to have an editor. Bruce, Hemingway had an editor. You need an editor."
Yes. I like to tell that to quite a few authors, too. You need an editor. You have a good story, but you need an editor.
He says to me, he says, "Now what are you trying to say here? Do you need all that description around?" And of course, then you wake up. I don't need all those other, but what am I trying to say? What's the best way to say it? Mm-hmm. So it's an enjoyable situation to be in. I know you know that yourself. It's lovely. Yeah. It's lovely.
Yeah. Well, tell us about Button End and the Cedar Street School, the
yes.
two-room
Cedar Street School.
That's what I
built in 1870. Mm-hmm. Well, but this is the ordinary that I used to answer that question. Button End is part of the old town of Woburn, Massachusetts. Woburn goes back to 1640, 20 years after the Pilgrim.
And what part of Massachusetts is that?
It's about 10 miles north of Boston. Uh-huh. And if you came in from Gloucester, the seaport, it's about 8 miles inland. Button End was a tannery town. It was a farming community, and it was just filled with immigrants. immigrants from all over the world. I joke all the time that you could swear in 7 languages by the time you were 7.
I love that story.
It's so true.
And then you recited.
Yeah, and you just learn the other ways. You learn to be respectful of a lot of things, people's religion, how they did their business, how they ran their families. You learn, and their foods, you learned all about foods and so forth. And there in Button Inn, I suppose I should answer why it's called Button Inn. There are 2 stories. One was that there was a little button factory that burned down the same night that Fatty Arbuckle, the silent movie star, had a big party at the old Mishawar Manor, because all of these places are gone. That's one story. The second story was that they used the school to store wooden buttons in at one time. Oh. And you could find little pieces of button around the schoolyard. But it was the 2-room school, Cedar Street School, and there you went. You walked to school, walked home for lunch, and then walked back. 6 grades, 2 teachers, 2 rooms. They knew you before you got there. They knew your uncle, your aunt, your grandfather. They knew who they were going to have trouble with, who was extremely smart and who was going to have little problems. They knew all of these things, and you were extraordinarily respectful to the teacher. No big harsh discipline or threats or anything like that. But you were told, you will respect those teachers. How did it go? It's an honor for you to go there, and don't you forget it. That's what you were told.
And in your audiobook, you talk about the lessons learned from being in the 2-room schoolhouse.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick one here. One kid, his name is Martin Lynch, got rheumatic fever. And that was way back. So that was it. That was a terrible thing. Martin's going to have to stay home, and his life is going to stop for a while. Not at the Cedar Street School. They had a day bed put in the back of the classroom, so Martin could get up when he was tired and go take a little nap, and then come back and join the class. And that's how those things were handled. You got head lice. They sent you on with kerosene and something else to get rid of the head lice. Everything was looked at. Nothing was said over there. Everything was examined, no matter what it was. And these wonderful teachers, Miss Gates and Miss Cronin, just marvelous, marvelous women who were in control. You weren't afraid of them, but there was discipline. This is what you did. You were told to be quiet. You were quiet. It was so different than we hear about now.
And I'm sure because the parents backed them up.
Oh yeah. The parents were very involved in the school. They tried to close the school one time. There wasn't enough kids to attend. I think we had 28 or something like that, whatever it was, for the 6th grades. And the school committee came in, closed the school, and they used this. They said, well, we're going to close the school. The school needs a paint job, and we need someone to stoke the furnace and so forth. And this happens to be a personal story. My father, Bob Allen, got all the men together, and they all found some paint, going to find a common color. They'll paint the school. The next one was, we don't have a janitor. He organized the men. Each one of them was going to take a turn to stoke up the coal furnace to heat the 2-room schoolhouse. And then the parents went after the school committee. They want the teachers to have a raise. That took care of the closing of the school. There was no closing of the school. It didn't happen until I was in the 5th grade, and that's when they closed the school finally. Oh. And now, you originally started asking me about Button Inn. Button Inn is shopping malls, convenience stores, highways. There's practically nothing left. It's in my mind, and that's why I want to share it. I have some old photographs.
And it's no longer called Button Inn.
Most people wouldn't know. 2 generations, a generation and a half out, what was Button Inn?
Yeah.
I still answer those stories. What was Button Inn?
And before you read us a story, which we're so lucky that you're going to do that, you said that JFK came to Button Inn.
Yes. Now, if you're going to get the stories, make sure you get that story. Yes, JFK came to Button End, and there's a whole, I guess in the newspaper business they call it a backstory. There's a whole story, the backstory behind JFK coming to Button End, and it shows a lot about JFK's character. It really does. It's a wonderful. Yes, JFK did come to Button End once.
And were you there?
I was young enough to be aware of him being there. My father and mother walking down to the school. It was not at the Cedar Street. It was at the Goodyear School, but all the talk about he's coming, and so forth. You know, so you heard the stories at home, and I was
More stories happened.
yes. So I was lucky that I was able to tell the story.
I just love the name Button End.
It's got a ring to it, hasn't it?
Well, and an old-fashioned, quaint name,
Yeah.
really. So, now we're all excited.
Well, don't be too excited.
Well, I'm excited that you're going to read a story.
I have a story here called Maz Old Hands. This is a true story. This actually happened. So let's give it a shot. I hope you'll enjoy this. Maz Old Hands. Like thousands of other travelers, I was going home for Christmas. I had taken the red-eye special. I was going home to see my elderly mother in Button End. As the plane lifted from San Francisco Airport, I was settling in and wondering, how many more times would I be able to go back home to visit my mother? My father had died quite a few years before, but my mother stayed in Button End, taking care of that big house, living there all by herself. She had many friends and neighbors, and 3 of her 4 sons lived close by and often came to visit with her. She was past 80 now. She was a feisty lady, absolutely determined. Anytime my brothers and I suggested that an apartment or a condominium or some other living arrangement might be better for her, well, anytime we said that, her Irish fire would come right up. She'd point to the front door and say, I'm not moving from here, I'm going out that door, feet first. My mother had come to America as an Irish immigrant when she was 19 years old. She came alone. After my parents were married, my mother moved to this house in Button End, and that was over 50 years ago. As the plane lifted higher and higher, the stewardesses were bustling around, doing the little things they do. People clicking on lights, arranging newspapers. Those who wanted to sleep, getting pillows. I sat quietly by the window, looking at the clouds, and I thought I was seeing memories of my mother. I remembered her stories of leaving Ireland by herself, and of meeting her husband, of moving into her house, of raising her 4 sons. None of us ever got into trouble. We simply did what she wanted us to do. As usual, packed in my suitcase were the things she loved. A loaf of San Francisco sourdough bread, some Dungeness crab, a couple of bottles of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. But these were just token gifts. I thought, what could I really give my mother? Every time I wanted to give her something, she would say, save your money, I don't need it, I have everything I need. Save your money. I remember that my sister-in-laws were forever bringing her pieces of silver for the dining room. Finally, my mother told the 3 of them, you bring me 1 more piece of silver and it's going back home with you. You can polish it. Don't forget I'm an Irish immigrant and I know all about polishing silver, especially in other people's houses. I'm not going to polish it in mine. That took care of the gifts of silver. Over the years, I tried to bring my mother other gifts, but I never really succeeded. As I sat in the plane that was taking me to see her, my mind drifted to how I really see my mother. I thought of her hands, and then started to see her life through her hands. So I wrote these words. Maz Old Hands. 5 o'clock, dozing off. Today, Maz Old Hands are twisted with the ravages of age. But many years ago, her hands were raised in a wave to a young man on a motorcycle who would become her husband. I remember her hands blessing my brothers and me with care and love. Hands soothing the pain of childhood falls. Hands meting out fair, not harsh discipline. Hands silently pressing yours in childhood to give you courage. Cool hands on a child's hot forehead, searching for fevers. Hands cooking the food we ate. Hands that scrubbed and cleaned for years and years. Hands clasped in silent prayer. Hands calming the waters of a troubled friend. Tiny little girl hands picking shamrocks. Hands waving farewell to those never to be seen again. Hands grasping the railing of an immigrant ship. Hands lifted up to say, I want America to be my country now. Hands that are proud. Hands that are strong and practical. Hands that I love. Maz Old Hands. I arrived at the airport and took a taxi out to the house. My mother was waiting for me, standing outside the door with the cold wind blowing around her. I knew she had gotten very dressed up, looking her best for me. The refrigerator was filled with cold chicken and more food for my visit. We hugged, and I felt her hands as we walked up the stairs to the house. I said, I have something for you. She asked, did you bring some crab? I said, yes. She started talking about sharing it with her good friend Libby, her friend for over 40 years. I've something else for you, I said. It's just a piece of paper. We finally sat down in the den, and I passed the little poem I'd written on the plane. She put her glasses on and read in silence. I knew she had finished, but she sat there a while longer. Then she looked up with tears in her eyes and said, thank you, my son. That's a real gift.
Yes, stories are.
Thank you.
Stories are a real gift.
Yeah.
That was very touching.
When I gave that to my mother years ago, of course my mother's gone now, I was back in Boston, and my oldest brother came in to visit and so forth. And he was all kind of upset, and he said, hey, listen, Bruce, I hope you don't mind. And I'm wondering what's coming down the turnpike here. He said, do you remember the poem you wrote for Ma? And I said, yeah, my mother was sitting right there. And he said, I hope you don't mind, but a friend of mine, his mother's in a nursing home, and the nursing home printed it and put it on the wall.
Aww.
And I said, how could I not mind? How could I not mind? And that's the poem. That's the poem.
Well, that's nice. Then it's lasting.
Yes, yeah, isn't it? I think a lot of people can, everyone's got a mother.
Yes.
And you can identify.
Mm-hmm. That was lovely. And if everybody would like to hear more stories, then you have 2 series of audiobooks. The first one is called Come Home with Me to Button End. And that's a 3-volume collection of stories.
It runs about 3 hours.
Running 3 hours, yeah. And then Remembrances, Stories of Hospice and Home Care. That's a 2-volume audiobook, and it's for people who work in hospice and people who are being cared for.
Yeah, it's also, the stories in there are also warm stories of something wonderful happening in life. And they're true. They're what happened of these beautiful people who I knew all those years. And they're all on audible.com.
Yeah.
And You have to download them. And they're priced, we call it Yankee pricing.
And what does that mean?
They priced them low. I had no control over that. And so forth. You probably know about that stuff. I don't know much about it at all. Yeah.
I'm just learning it.
And they could send this whole thing back and says, we're pricing them low because these are wonderful stories and we're going for volume.
Oh.
So in a long way, it's pretty good. Oh, and also, my plan is that when the costs of production are met, I want to donate the money to a hospice.
Yeah.
That's where I intend to do it. And there's, of course, there are many hospice organizations. There's a lovely one in Petaluma. I live in Petaluma now, and there's a lovely organization there.
Well, that's a wonderful way to give back, and I know that's what your family taught you.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I also believe in that philosophy. Giving back. It was interesting. I retired, and my daughter said to me, "So, Mom, what are you going to do to give back now?" And I thought, my only thought was, wow, I guess she was brought up pretty well to ask that question.
You know, before we leave on this thing, I spent many years as an onboard manager for Royal Viking Line, sailing around the world. And of course, you meet a lot of fascinating people in that field. And I wanted to get a button-end story that was connected to Royal Viking. And I did.
Oh.
It's called Royal Viking Fanny. And it's this woman, tremendously wealthy, just a great lady, great person, had all the attributes of women of button end, of helping and caring and being jovial and so forth. So I was able to sneak in a story, a button end story,
I remember
with the
that
Royal Viking background. Really.
Yeah. But it's true, your stories, Remembrances, and it says stories of hospice and home care, anybody would enjoy it, no matter what their circumstances were.
I think so.
I just want to testify to that.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
You've been so kind in your
I've
comments to the
just
stories.
personally enjoyed them.
Thank you so much, really.
I sincerely enjoyed your audio books that I got to hear. And it was fun to see your short video on your Facebook page.
Yes, that was interesting. That's got the old Mishawah Manor on that. Again, my producer, John Renette, put that all together. And
wonderful.
All those old photographs are real, the real stuff of the town and the kids and all the rest of the stuff.
And you get a little story. So we'll put that on the credits, your Facebook page, how to get to your Facebook page.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And then you'll get to see all the old photographs with, and hear a nice story with that.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been delightful meeting you.
It was wonderful having you on WriterSpeak. Thank you for
again.
coming.
Thank you so much.
WriterSpeak is produced at C Media Lab in Santa Rosa. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette. And please join us next time for another exciting episode with a local author.